Yeah.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I feel like a little bit of an oddball though, because what I do is like on the other end of the spectrum from what you guys do, even though there's like a lot of similarities with sound. But I'm glad to share a bit of my history as an interdisciplinary artist. And I'm wondering, Deontay, there's a couple of students here, the young
Yeah,
one. Yeah, I want to see
yeah,
your faces for a second. Let me see. Karina. Karina, is that I pronounce your name
Yes.
correctly? Karina and Paula
Yeah.
also.
Paula is our visual arts teacher, actually.
Oh, cool, nice. And then I recognize, hi, Paula, how are you? And then I have Miss Galvez, right, joining us too. Hi, how are you? She's joining us from Miami. It's
Doing
good to see
good.
your face. So let me share a bit of my history. Maybe what I can do is ask Neji if we can bring up my website so I can provide a bit of some visuals. Thank you. So just to explain what I do, I am an interdisciplinary visual artist. I don't even like to say that word because I consider myself a crossbreed of different types of expertise. You know, I grew up in a family where there was a lot of performance and a lot of visual artists. And my grandmother, my father's side of the family, was a counter-revolutionist in Cuba, and she was a performance artist at the young age of 14. She was like a songstress. She made music and sang, and she'd write poetry, and she traveled a lot. And she had to at some point leave Cuba because the government supposedly was looking for her because she did things that were against, you know, Castro. And my father was left behind, and then she went back to get him. And then once they arrived to the States, my dad was just, you know, a young, like I think 8-year-old kid or 9-year-old kid. They grew up in this, he grew up in the States. And there was always like that big influence of literature and poetry and performance in my family. My grandmother was awarded the key of Chicago, the city. She used to go from university to university reciting her poetry and her literature. And then on my mom's side of the family, they were a lot of painters. And so I was just surrounded by this constantly in my life. It just found its way to me. And so by the age of 16, I left my house. I was like this very young, you know, scholarly kind of punk kid who left my house at the age of 16. I fell into the whole rave scene, the gothic music, and that really shaped my identity growing up when it came to visual arts. You know, there was something about that visual language when it came to using my body as a canvas per se, to express these ideas that I had. And I wasn't really just using my body as a canvas, like literally just putting body paint on it. I was creating these identities, you know, that started to evolve. They evolved from my background as a fashion model. Once I turned 18, my mom took me to a Paul Mitchell casting and I was selected. And from there, I was just like constantly doing like a lot of runway work, and which I was really interested in. But then, you know, circumstances of life, something happened. I had an opportunity to go to Japan and work on my career as a young budding fashion model. But there was this huge turn that shifted my gaze to the visual arts. And so I had to make a decision. And eventually I was able to contact New World School of the Arts. That's in Miami, Florida. They're a part of the University of Florida. And I contacted the dean in the Department of Art, and I explained that I had to come, you know, I had to attend school, that I had to do visual arts, and this person kept informing me that they already had done the selection process, that they weren't going to look at any more portfolios until the following year. And I kept insisting, I was like, no, you don't understand, I have to go to school now. And the dean was just like, no, I don't think you understand. We already made our selections. It's already too late for this. So I kept insisting, and finally he invited me to bring my work to his office, which I did. And, you know, like I brought in all of my paintings, I lined it up, and then he saw the work and he said to me, I'm going to take a chance with you, and I'm going to give you the same opportunity that I gave to this young man a few years ago who came to me with a piece of paper. I asked him to come see me. He came with a piece of paper, and it was all folded up. And when I opened it up and I saw what was on it, he was like, I knew that this person was brilliant, and I gave him an opportunity. And this person's doing amazing now in California. And I was just like, okay. So I started going to New World and as a painter, but then, you know, I started dabbling in video art, and I started dabbling in like sculpture and all of these things. And it was just like this really messy, blurry thing for a lot of the professors at the school during that time. It wasn't very welcoming for a visual artist to be so diverse in their language. And it was hard. It was hard for me. You know, it was really difficult. I didn't have a lot of support, and I kind of had to find my way, you know, but being that I was attending New World School of the Arts, I had great contacts as professors, and those individuals eventually saw, you know, the work, the thought process behind my work and the execution, and they started giving me opportunities, and thus my career started to really take off. And at that time, you know, it was like, I thought about, I was very conscious about what I was doing, but perhaps, you know, being a young mind, there's moments where we don't have that language fully developed as to what we want to say. And that's why having an artist statement and surrounding yourselves by mentors such as what, you know, Barry, Franklin, Frank, anyone that you can be surrounded by will give you that training to develop not only your style so you can find yourself, but also the language that you're going to need in order to express clearly what it is that you want to do. And that's something that, you know, I bumped my head a lot through that process, because even though I was very intelligent and I knew how to write, there were things that I was still missing and I had to figure out along the journey. But because of these opportunities that I had to present work in China, you know, during Art Shanghai, or during Art Basel, Miami, or in Germany, I was able to, again, communicate with individuals that kind of taught me along the way as well. And eventually I realized that, you know, looking retrospectively at my work, it was that as a visual artist who does identify as she, her, as a woman, I realized that I was basically taking a look at all the histories that surround the female identity, and I was reinscribing the history in present time. In other words, I would challenge what that notion meant for a woman, and I'd come back in and I would create these very site-specific pieces or commissioned works, or at gallery spaces at museums or during like events, where I would incorporate, you know, the use of material as an installation, and then I'd create these works of art that I would also wear. Some of them, you know, were made with fibers, fabric. Sometimes it was with paint, like such as these. I don't know if I can, Saji, can I scroll down myself, or would you do that for me? Okay. So I'll give you an example of what I mean with like working with paint. If we go back up to this image, if you roll back up here, this image right here, this young girl with the makeup on her face, it's white powder. And then if you go up to this image, scroll up a little bit more, Seji, where I have this paint. I was invited to show some work during an Art Basel exhibition that never manifested afterwards. But I kept thinking about, you know, the issues that we're dealing with in America with race, and it's a controversial topic to discuss. I remember hearing Frank, or I think it was Barry earlier in the other conversation, that, you know, as a visual artist, we take on a sense of duty to challenge conversations that people don't want to discuss at times. And with that comes a lot of empowerment, but it also comes with a lot of consequences, you know, because what happens is that, you know, being that, first of all, I'm a Latina, and I normally wouldn't disclose that at first in my career. I would always try to be as ambiguous as I possibly could be. So I didn't want to identify with my artwork. although my work is always about my face, but my face was constantly changing. I remember that when I created these pieces in particular, there was a lot of questioning to what I was trying to say with the work. You know, it was like, well, she painted her face orange. Is she trying to insinuate that it's about, is she making herself blackface? Or why is the young African American girl with a white face, like, what is she trying to say? And with this body of work, you know, it's called Buy Your White Jeans. I had asked a bunch of women of color like myself to put on these different colors on our faces because I I was, you know, I was questioning the controversy behind genetics and genetic designing and engineering that scientists are engaging with. You know, they want to, they're genetically enhancing genes and the way people are going to look in the future and how we can design what we're going to look like. And so that question was, that was basically like the fundamental purpose of this body of work. It was just like, well, are we going to have to modify our exteriors at some point in America just so that we can fit in with the rest of society? And for a lot of people, they needed to hear that explanation with the work, because if I didn't provide that language, then it was going to, as simple as the work is, it was creating like this type of shock or controversy already, without people not really fully understanding why I was using these colors, you know? And I was doing this because as a person who has always been somewhat fluid in my identity, I had an issue with being categorized with a particular race or gender. Like, I always found that to be such a strategy for people to continuously be divided in our country or wherever you go, but specifically in America. And, you know, reflecting back on my adolescence as a teenager and even as a fashion model, I had a lot of difficulties with that. You know, like I remember, you know, my hair's wavy, and I remember having like a lot of hairstylists that didn't even want to work with my hair when I was a model. I remember one particular photo shoot where all the women, all the girls, the models were all blonde with long hair, blue eyes, super white and pasty, and I was the only woman of color, the only model of color. And the makeup artist made all of the girls so alluring, you know, simple makeup, beautiful white dresses. They looked stunning, like they had just walked off a runway. And then here I am, and the makeup artist takes his bandage and he bandages up my head like a mummy, you know, and he makes like this really crazy, outrageous makeup on my face. And he puts me in this like really puffy sweater that had nothing to do with what the other girls were wearing. And the fashion photographer, Nick Norwood, comes up to me and he's like, "What are you wearing?" And I'm like, "I don't know." And he like, and mind you, this is a white American, blue-eyed photographer, like, who was really nice to me. And he was so bothered by what he saw. Like, he saw the malice behind the makeup artist's like work, you know? And I remember that he left the room and he's basically scolded the makeup artist and he was like, "Why are you dressing her that way? Like, make her look like the other girls, just make her look natural." And that made such an impact on me. Like, it really, like it kind of like put a dent in my spirit, you know, at that moment. It didn't keep me from moving forward as a visual artist and what I wanted to do with my work, but it really made me like aware of how discriminating of an environment I was living in or I was working in, and how much that was constantly surrounding my world. And so in my work, I am constantly going back and taking these images of women, you know, which is always of myself, but just transforming this person into something that is always questionable. You know, like, what is she doing? What is she saying? I'll give you like another example. I'm gonna pull up, I'm gonna share the screen if possible. how am I supposed to do this again? I just want to go to my desktop and get the picture, right?
Then click share screen once you open the
Mm-hmm.
image.
I'm getting the folder out. I'm going to show you all like some recent works that I've done. So as I said before, you know, I'm a multidisciplinary visual artist. I'm constantly jumping from one medium to the next, but it's because I've realized that there's so much value when it comes to visual language, you know, and how, what tool, what platform am I going to use in order to like, I guess, execute what I'm trying to say. So am I supposed to, let me see. Okay, desktop.
I like Belaxis. Can I just comment while you're looking while you're
Yeah, go ahead.
So I thought of something that was similar to what I was saying to Deontay, in that it seems as though your work is this really interesting dichotomy between putting yourself out there in this very vulnerable way and sort of using yourself as the canvas, like you said, and making statements that are potentially, controversial and whatever, and also like at the same time being very, very much seeming like you have a very a firm core and foundation, like you said, when coming up with the artist statement and working through that and getting to the point where you know who you are and what it is that you're trying to express enables you to do this in a very vulnerable way, even though in a very powerful way, even though you're still remaining very vulnerable, even as a part of the work and as the artist. I don't know if I'm saying what I want to say clearly, but I saw a parallel.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys, I'm struggling to get this image into the share file. So that's why I'm taking a moment here.
Is it possible? Is something that you can share a link on the chat?
Yeah, there are these photographs. How else can I show this? Hold up.
Yes, we have pretty much the rest of the afternoon, so.
Because I'm like, so now, Seji, if you can walk me through, like I'm going into the share screen as we did before, but I'm not able to see.
Did you open the image first?
Oh, I smell.
Can you open the image first on your
Yeah,
preview?
let me click on it.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, here's one.
Yep.
Perfect.
Then click share screen.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to start off with this one first. Yeah, Barry. So going back to what you said, making yourself truly vulnerable, you know, like when I was doing my work at first, I was like this young, ruthless kid, you know, who did put a lot of thought process into her work, but I was just so ready. Can you all see this image?
Yep.
Okay. I was just like a wild young buck, you know, just like boom, boom, with all this energy, putting work out. And I wasn't realizing how vulnerable I was making myself. Like, I just didn't think about that, you know? And I think that is because I'm also a dancer and a choreographer. So that's another language that I speak, you know, like the usage of body. And, you know, when you're a dancer, you're not sitting there and thinking, once you learn the choreography per se, you're not on stage thinking of every single moment as a count. You're just like living that moment through your movement. And I realized, you know, through social psychology, like not only is verbal language important, but your body language is really important too. And that's something that people notice right away. So I always thought about how can I incorporate that into my work, you know, like body language, even if the person is not dancing at that moment, how can I execute that in real time? And so with this work, this is called Bloodthirsty, the end of the reformers, the beginning of change. And this is a variation of the work. It's Hang Them by the Noose. So this performance took place at Fat Village in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, during an exhibition called Yes, I'm a Witch. It was curated by the University of Miami gallery and curator Millie Cardoza. And this piece was like a durational, you know, it was set already in the space. So when people walked in, they saw these huge sculptures that I made. They're made out of wood. They're like about 10 feet long by like 6 feet in width. And they'd kind of move and shift in the space. And eventually I had the women, which I dressed up. Some of the clothes I did make, all of these pieces were designed by myself. I dressed them up and then I had them go out and they had to take, you know, a posture that I had assigned. And, you know, something so simple as this, you know, I'm taking a look at the history of women as the witch, you know, 15th century, 16th century, women were constantly like killed for something as simple as just speaking up against their husband, you know? Are you showing me something, Barry? What is it? The crucible, yeah. Yeah, right. So it's like, so for me, I was just like, okay, so how can I rewrite that history to a certain extent, right? Something subtle. And I position the girls, you know, here I have Maria, and her body language is it's very delicate, but there's something suggestive about her position, which I purposely did. And, you know, it's funny, can you believe that something this simple, when I presented the works to another curator with a panel of individuals, they were just like, oh, but that's so suggestive, the way she's sitting. And I'm just like, is it suggestive? Like, why is that such an issue? Why is it an issue? Why do we have to sexualize this poise right here? You know? And so those type of things, those little nuances, it really nailed what I was doing in my artwork as a visual artist, as a Latina. You know, like it was putting attention to those small little details so that the person wouldn't just walk in and say, oh, this is amazing. It's visually stunning. You know, it's like there's more to it. You have to step in now. Now you can immerse yourself within the space. You can actually experience what's happening there. And then you're going to learn something more just by reading the body language of each woman that they're carrying. So then I created this piece, and let me see, tell me if you see this image. Let me see. So in 2018, I was invited, Lavi and I went to Africa. Lavi's my daughter, little 8-year-old. We went to Africa, and so I had been contacted by an ambassador who lives in the Western Sahara. And this ambassador represents his people, the Sahrawis, and a lot of people in different parts of the world that are not closely connected to that region are not familiar with what's happening to the Sahrawi community, which I wasn't. I had no idea. I didn't know anything about them. I was completely ignorant to their history. And so I received a phone call from an ambassador because a visual artist in Miami had passed along my work and let them know, you know, she does a lot of social activism, which I never considered myself an activist or a social, like an arts advocate of any sort. I just did what I did, you know?
Significant to me. I want to talk about that later, but continue.
So, you know, so the ambassador gives me a call and he introduces himself. He's like, I'm Ambassador Melanin Slama. I represent the Sahrawi community in Africa. And I'm in Washington, D.C. right now. And I was given your information. I'd like to meet with you in person to see if perhaps you can come to Africa. I would like for you to work with us. I need someone like you to be a voice for us. And I was just like, okay, this is amazing. Absolutely. So this gentleman comes down, I meet with him. We sit down for like an hour and a half, 2 hours, and we talk. And he's like, well, what do you think that you can do? And I'm just like, I'll make work. I'll make work. I'll help you, you know, I'll figure it out. So I kept this relationship with Melanie. We became really good friends. I organized and curated a couple of radio talks in Miami on different radio stations, just because I wanted to talk about the community, and I wanted to reach the Spanish audience, because I had no idea that there were a lot of Cubans and Spanish families that knew of the Sahrawis because of relatives, because it's political. I'll explain that in just a second. So I was like, the Sahrawis need a lot of support because they're facing these issues with the Moroccan government. They're seeking to have their independence, and therefore they're living in the liberated territories of Morocco, and that is creating a huge conflict with them and Morocco, the Moroccan government. And the United Nations can only do so much, because the United Nations also believes in creating peace, having peace and remaining neutral. So there's a lot of political tension surrounding the conversation. However, a lot of the Cubans in Cuba, they send teachers to work with the Sahrawi community. And a lot of the Sahrawis send their children to Cuba to stay with families so they can study and learn. And vice versa, the same thing happens in Spain. The children that are in the communities in the desert are able to stay with families in Spain so that they can pursue an education, go work, learn, and they have these beautiful ties and relationships with the Spanish and Latin community. And I had no idea. So once I became aware, then I started to talk, within the community of Miami, so I can reach these individuals so that they can, donate money, help with their cause, whatever they can pitch in, And so this started, and eventually I created, I curated an exhibition that also took place at Fat Village. And that's another story. But eventually in 2018, I was able to receive support from the art center in Miami, and they paid our way, and we were able to go to Africa. And we were there for 2 weeks, and I was able to get to know the Sahrawis, with the kids, the women, the men, and I was able to learn how fierce the women are. And I mean, I say that and it gives me goosebumps. I see a lot of women here claim to be feminists, and I'm like, you have no idea who the real feminists are until you go to the Sahrawi community and you meet the Sahrawi women. Those women are fighters, and those women engineered their towns. When the men were off to war, they're the ones that created the schools, the hospitals. They basically created the whole infrastructure of all the refugee camps out in the desert. And they taught me so much. They were generous. They were basically giving us lessons on what feminism really is about, and motherhood, and how to be like resilient. And so I asked their permission. I was like, listen, I want to create a body of work that is, I guess, like what I see myself as now that I'm living with you in your region and I'm learning from you. And I want to be able to assemble something to wear. And I'm like, would you feel disrespected if I did that? And they were super open to it. They were like, no, do your thing. We can't wait to see what you create. And so I went out into the desert with a friend and my daughter and 3 of the other women, the Sahrawis, and I started to create these wearable sculptural pieces, that I'm seeing right here. And all of these pieces, I'm actually holding a gun, but the gun is not loaded. This is one of their artifacts that was part of their museum that they have out there. And I asked permission, if I can use it. And they were like, come in here and take whatever you need to use for your work, which I did. And I created these series. And I mean, I'm only showing one of them to you right now, but there's a video composition. There's about 4 different looks that I created with the weapons on my body, and I'm sitting on them, wearing them. And it was an amazing experience, and I was able to present the work to the community right before we left. And it was actually hilarious because, you know, some of the works actually show, they reveal parts of my leg. And as I'm presenting the works, I noticed that the men started to, you know, get up and they started to exit the haima, the tent. And I knew why that was, you know, it was because it was making them uncomfortable because they could see my leg. They were seeing skin. But I purposely did that, you know, I just wanted to kind of push a little bit of a boundary there. And, you know, during the Q&A, I was receiving all these questions from a lot of the Spanish and Italian artists that were there, but I was like, no, I really want to receive questions from the women. I want to hear what they have to say of the work, you know? And they spoke amongst themselves. And then one of them, and she's like, we really love what you've done. We encourage you to keep doing it. I think that you've made this amazing representation, what you wanted to wear of us. It's like a hybrid, and we're not offended by it. And we love that you're showing your legs. And there was like such an amazing response. And I felt really empowered at that moment because I was able to kind of rewrite like this prescriptive narrative that we all have about the women, you know, like Arab women or Muslim women, when you see them wearing their traditional clothes. And we have this in America, like this fixed narrative about what that means and why they're wearing that. And I realize that it's not all what we think it really means, you know, and that they actually have the power to change that. And I was able to change that narrative with them. So that was like something really great that I experienced with the community. And as a matter of fact, right now I'm actually organizing a series of workshops that we're going to be doing on Zoom, just so I can create more work with them that I'll eventually exhibit online. And then I'd like to show this next image. Can you see this next image with the flowers and the plants, or not really?
Not yet. You need to reshare it.
Okay. Okay, here's another one.
Yeah, we can see it.
You can see it?
Yep.
Right here with the girl with the flowers.
Mm-hmm.
So I did these pieces, Flora Femme. That's this last year. Again, working with women, you know, women of diverse colors, backgrounds, ethnicities, me included. And we went out into a state park to photograph the women. I wanted to, you know, represent women in their natural state. Let me share another image as well. Hold up. I think this one will do justice.
What's up, Jarrell? While you're looking for that, I just want to also, I want to maybe quickly, maybe we don't have to address it right now, but I wanted to bring up what I was talking about before. So I thought it was really significant that you said that your work seemed to have a very strong political impact or social impact, and that wasn't so much your intention. And I think that that's really powerful in the sense that not that it's like, oh, it wasn't your intention or you didn't think of it. I think that obviously you were exploring a question and a dynamic that was personal to you in your own way, and again, in your vulnerable way. And that spoke to people above and beyond your having a particular agenda that you were trying to, you know, to get across and to impose upon people. And I think that's a really important thing for people to realize as artists who want to say something and make a commentary on the world. It's like you're sort of sometimes more effective when you just let the message out rather than pushing the message into people's faces.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's funny because, you know, it comes back to this, people have this personification of who I am, who I'm supposed to be. You know, because of the work that I create. And in actuality, I'm kind of like the white rabbit in Alice in Wonderland. I'm like, like the little nervous rabbit, like, okay, you know, like always working, and I have a fast mind, and I'm like really silly, or not, I become really quiet, and I'm very reclusive. And people, but I'm also, when I have to speak up, like I speak up. And it's not, and I don't do it with, you know, I don't impose anything at anyone, and I don't do it to be disrespectful. It's just that I'm aware. I see everything. I sense everything. And I ask questions, you know, and I've realized that by asking questions, and I ask those questions through my work, sometimes people get really offended with me. They get really offended. And then when I come back and I call them out, and I'm just like, okay, but why are you offended when I'm just communicating visually XYZ? And they don't like that either. And so I've had to learn to really disattach, separate myself completely from that part of my work, so I can never take anything personal. You know, because I'm not, every 5 minutes I'm going to take something personal, and it's just going to stop me from creating work. And, you know, this is the kind of work that I'm supposed to create. Like, this is just my natural language. I can't help it. I think if I were to force myself to do something that's not me, it just wouldn't work, you know? And I think that that's really important for the young artists to know that as they're developing their work and finding who they are. It's like a certain type of maturity level. I don't know if it's like this intellectual, emotional, spiritual maturity that you gain through your experiences or through insight, that you realize, you know, I'm creating this to put it out into the world. It's a gift. So right there, my intention is not malicious. So I know that what's going to come back to me is going to be rewarding, because it was never malicious. It's just because I want people to ask these questions, and I want us to become comfortable with these discussions. No one ever like everyone now, we're all talking about race, right? We're talking about race because it had to get to the disturbing point of human beings getting killed on TV, basically. And people sitting there desensitized watching it, for us to slap people in the face, and you're like, why are you okay with this? Like, why does it get to this point for us to have this conversation? It shouldn't have to get to this point. So I think that, you know, I think that if you realize as a visual artist that you have, I don't even want to call it power, because I feel that that sounds narcissistic. I think it's like a sense of responsibility more than anything else. It's like my sense of duty. I feel like I have a mission in this world. I came into this world knowing what that mission was, and this is what it is. And I use performance and I use visual language because I think that I can poetically discuss really difficult topics, and you take it as you go. And if you want to get upset with me, even though I didn't really do anything offensive, then that's your prerogative, because you obviously don't know who I am.
Well, it makes it up to the surface of the conversation, certainly, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of conversations that are super important that we need to address, you know, from the LGBTQI community to Black community to people of color, Indian, Arab, Latins. There's so many conversations that are ignored because they're brushed under the rug, or it's like, it's just, it just doesn't go with the system. And I think that this is the right moment, if anything, during the pandemic, even though we're locked in our homes, to really keep pushing that work out there, so that everyone's, you know, people are starting to wake up. Our consciousness is being heightened. And I think that through the power of visual language and body language and even written language, we can reach so many individuals. And I think that the young generation right now has so much support from people like us that I know I didn't have. I had to like get kicked around and beat and bump my head on, you know, and make all these horrible mistakes. And, you know, to realize this. And now we can pass on batons to the younger generation and help them to make their way a lot easier.
I hope they're tough enough. you know, they have the support and whatever, but you know, we who maybe, you know, in the last few decades were sort of trying to find our place and our way, we did get knocked around, and so we have this sense of detachment and an ability to be vulnerable within our own selves and also strong on the outside. And I hope that, yeah, I hope that younger artists can develop that through their own. I mean, everybody's going to take their licks somehow. So I hope, you know, that people have the strength to take those, to realize that there are messages that are being heard now that wouldn't have been heard X number of years ago, but they still need the same energy behind them in order to proceed into the next level, into the next, you know, era.
Right. That's right. You know, so with that being said, because I've been speaking a lot about the work, and I hope that it's been clear and concise, this journey that I've taken, and I have so much more to go. I mean, I'm really excited to say that just recently I was awarded, the Miami-Dade Cultural Affairs awarded me the Miami Dance Choreographer Award. So
Nice.
from 26 applicants, only 7 of us were selected, and it was like, it was so nice, you know, to receive that accolade, because I really have been working so hard with minimal support. I mean, there are some individuals here in Miami that have been, I mean, great supporters, you know, as far as the performance and the arts community goes, but it's been really tough. And you said something, Barry, the young generation is going to have to be so, I mean, I'm talking about like tougher than tough to move forward,
Yeah.
because you can't have thin skin in this type of career, like career path. Like you have to be willing to get those blows. So I wanted to ask the young ones, you know, that are on right now, what their questions are as far as, you know, performance, or if they have any questions with about my career as a performance visual artist. I want to hear what their thoughts are.
What was your process behind ignoring the negative feedback that that you endured after sharing your art with people? And by the way, I love what you do. Like, it's really colorful and beautiful. So I just want to compliment you.
Thank you so much. You know, believe it or not, the process has been a lot of isolation for me, a lot of reflecting. I meditate a lot, and I'm not saying that I'm not saying that to sound like these, you know, people that they're like, oh, I'm all about yoga. And I'm sorry that that sounds so critical, but I know a lot of people that they say that they're spiritual, and I'm like, whoa, now I know why you're trying to be spiritual.
You need it.
You're scaring me, you know. But I'm a very quiet person. I like silence. And I think that it was through a lot of prayer and meditation, reading, painting. My daughter coming into my life was also significant for me to learn a new process, for me to continue growing and working. Just because you know, I was I was kind of naive in a way where I would allow myself to become invested in people's lives, to be their friends. And I realized that that's been like one of the biggest things that I've learned not to do anymore as a visual artist, you know, because there has to be a separation between your professional life and your private life, you know. And I think that sometimes things get a little too muddled. And I just I just like being alone. You know, it's like the best space for me to be at when it comes to create, and even to like deliberate literature, because I love writing. That's another part of my practice. That's just really, um, it's just really grown and developed a lot. And I'm always like, you know, I pay attention to the news. I'm constantly researching. I've learned like I just don't take things personal anymore, Franklin. You know, I think I've just grown up. I just don't take things personal. I can't.
That's it. That's the most important one right there. You said that before. I was gonna, if you didn't repeat it, I was gonna bring that back up because
Yeah, I've learned, you know, a lot of times when people do these really horrible, um, actions towards you, it's really a problem that they're having with themselves. And then they project that on you, and you're just like, okay, I see. That's why it's so important for us to mentor the young artists to become mature, like I guess a lot quicker, mentally mature and emotionally, so that they can realize this, so they don't have to go for 15 years of their life like thinking, oh my God, I'm not good enough, people don't like me, oh, I offended this person, what are they gonna say? Like, that has to go out the window. It really does. And you know, and as a woman, I have to say, like, a lot of times we're not given the opportunity to show that we are resilient and that we are tough. People, a lot of men, unfortunately, have, you know, they see women as like these emotional, insolent creatures that once you have, you speak up or you say what's on your mind or you show some type of resistance, it's like, she's difficult, you're labeled. And I think that as a woman, for any young girl, it's important to step into that power, your own, be your own agent, have that authority, and not be afraid to say what you have to say. And if they don't want to hear it, the right person will come along. It's just like, stay focused and keep producing your work and don't worry about anything else.
Those are the type of things that they don't teach us in school now, don't they? Like they don't educate not only our young ladies, but like even the young children who are just trying to figure out themselves and figure out their voices. They don't educate them on how to, like, hey, don't look at it from that point. Like, try to go forward even with all the bad look. So I appreciate you saying that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's really important. I mean, I have a little girl, you know, I have a daughter, and I think that I'm so glad, I'm so happy that I'm raising her as a single parent, because I'm seeing
Yeah,
her like,
I'm a product of a single parent too. Like, I'm an only child, so I know how important that is. You know, my mom raised me with a very she tried to take the most cultural standpoint as possible. Like, she tried to teach me everything about how to love myself and how to appreciate. But school is a thing for young adults that kind of takes away from those teachings and shows you a different side of, you know, our history and our culture. I'm Latino myself, so me and Deontay, I don't think he's here anymore, but we were talking about that earlier, about like, just, you know, in my high school years, which is way before the pandemic, there was like a disassociation with my culture and myself, and I didn't even know why. I wasn't trained to understand any of that until I went into the real world and got a job, started paying rent. You get to see the real reality behind things, especially being an artist in New York City, you know.
yeah, absolutely. You know, and like I said before, I wasn't even really aware of my race or my gender until I was out there in the real world, and it was just like all over the place. Like, everything was a problem, you know? And I was just like, oh my God, what is going on here? Like, is this what it's like? Like, is this how my life is going to be for the rest of the time that I want to like live it? This is insane.
Sure is.
It's insane. And I think that, you know, again, I don't have any issues. I don't have any like gender issues when it comes to like men, like a man and myself working together, collaborating on a project. Like, I really do see us as equals, you know. That stops if at some point the person says something that is like, it is offensive or insulting, then I'm just like, okay, we're obviously not on the same level now, you know, things just change. But I've never seen, I've never thought of any gender being more superior than the other. But I do think that woman offers something so tremendous to humanity. You know, we are the child bringers. We, you know, when we have the opportunity to like raise even a boy, a young man, you yourself, Franklin, you said that you're a product of a single parent.
Yeah.
I've seen so many amazing men brought up by a single parent, the mother, and I'm like, wow, they really are amazing with their girlfriends or their wives. And I see a significant change in their behavior. And I sometimes, you know, wonder if that's a reason why women are always stopped from achieving, you know, like political platforms in America, because women can be threatening to men who feel insecure about it. And that's a shame, you know, because I
You
think
just made me realize something about like myself. Like I'm like, yeah, for sure. I'm resonating with everything you're saying. Definitely. Definitely.
While we have a few minutes left, I had something that I wanted to just get your perspective on, because it seems like you had somehow or another you were able to have a real self-awareness about what the importance of your art or self-expression was, or maybe not importance, but the personal nature of it. And it doesn't seem like you were trying sort of to please anyone, to fit into any sort of established cultural mores. You weren't trying to be part of some extent. And I think one of the things that stands in the way of a lot of people's creativity these days is that everything has been so codified in the commercial world that people think that their options are very narrow, or they think they're supposed to be this, or they're supposed to be this character, especially where it comes to ethnicity, where it comes to gender, where it comes to all these things. Women are sexualized, black and brown people are sort of ethnicized, fetishized, all this stuff. And everything in America is about making that money, right? And all real art, as far as I'm concerned, not completely, but to a large degree, has to ignore that dynamic until it's done. And I'm just wondering if you have any advice for younger people as they're coming up, to how to sort of know themselves, how to embrace their identity, remain vulnerable, and also not think that they have to, that they have to live up to any cultural expectations outside of themselves.
Well, it's what I mentioned before. It's like I don't know if it's just like a heightened sense of consciousness, or if it's like an emotional, spiritual, intellectual maturity that we all have to attain in order for you to know that you don't have to be a part of the brand. I was always very independent. So I was just always awake. And even reflecting on, during my high school years, everybody in high school knew me, from the most popular to what was considered the nerd, because I would defend the nerd, And it was like, for some reason, people always respected me because I just never gave in to anything. Like, I just didn't want to be a part of it. I didn't want to be a part of it because I saw that there was it was so corrupt. It was so contaminated. I had issues when I'd see friends and talking bad about another friend, but then when the friend showed up, they were like, oh, hi, like super two-faced, like super fake. And I was just like, ew, do they not see what just happened there? I'm like, I don't like that. And I didn't want to be that because it didn't feel right. It just felt like so artificial, And so I think for the young ones, it's just like, if it doesn't feel right, don't force it. Don't be a part of it. You don't have to do anything to make anyone like you. If they can't like you for who you are, then they're not supposed to be in your world, and that's it. And we shouldn't have to ever lower our standards or lower who we want to be just so that we can fit into a system that's constantly oppressing us, constantly telling us that we're not good enough for anything, constantly leaving us out. We have the power to create our own culture, and that culture is one of inclusivity, of being diverse, of letting people know hey, we're in this together. We really are together, and I think they need to have that mindset from a young age and not be afraid, be confident, and just take a stand, take a stand and just be who you are.
Awesome.
Belaxis, I know that we're running out of time, but I did have a question about the way that your practice has kind of transformed over the years. I know that you've dabbled in being a choreographer, even in acting and visual arts, all of these different mediums kind of colliding into your practice. But I was also specifically wondering, how is it that you take a little bit of everything and then it becomes this new sort of medium? How is it that you do that for yourself?
Well, I mean, it just comes, you know, like it's like I'm orchestrating, like I'm composing these visual elements, and you know, and how they're going to relate to each other. One thing that I actually do love to do is I love to integrate materials or things that are not supposed to complement each other. Like I like to create tension in my work that way. So I intentionally look for those intersections in space, you know? And sometimes by looking, it's like mapping for me. Like I always look at things as like I'm like creating composition within a space, and it becomes into geometry. And within those spaces, there are certain points that exist and certain things start to happen. You know, it's like music. You know, when you compose your music, you hear a trombone or you hear a guitar in your head and your mind. It's the same thing with me with space. And so the work, that's why it's hard for me to even describe it, because I can tell someone, they're like, okay, well, what is your proposal? Like, what are you going to perform? Are you going to choreograph? And I'm like, let me just give you an explanation so that you can see that I'm going to map this out a certain way so that you can understand it. And it could be also that I may have a piece, but the choreography may not be used in that for that particular body of work. Maybe it's something different. It just so happens that each time that I've created a work, I just have managed to integrate all of these mediums. And I think it's because I naturally think that way, and therefore it happens. Does that answer your question?
I like the sense of
Oh,
that introduces, that you're looking at your visual language includes anything that's visual. It's like very, very cool.
Yeah, it's visual, it's sound, and then like it just comes, you know, and then I'm able to, it's almost like I'm working as like a choreographer, and at the same time I'm a curator, and I'm also like orchestrating it, like I'm a composer. So all of that just happens, and then I fill up the space as such.
So cool.
I have a question about the process as well, because looking at your work that I've seen so far, I think it seems very in your face and somewhat confrontational and rebellious. And I think all those things that I see in the work seems a little bit, it's hard for me to kind of like put together the concept of not wanting to impose, because I feel like your work is very imposing. And even when you speak about the experience of the piece that you did in Africa, and when you said you made certain choices purposely because you knew it was going to cause that tension that you were talking about earlier in the work, right? So how do you reconcile yourself with that? Because again, like you were saying earlier, you don't want to be that imposing person, and you're not going to be create tension unnecessarily, I guess, but like purposely using it and manipulating it in the work. How do you can you speak to that a little bit more? The idea, this concept of the tension that does blatantly exist in your work, but
I apologize for interrupting really quick. Our session was meant to end a minute ago for right now, for us to take a break for half an hour and to come back from 2 to 3 with another class from Belaxis and another one from 3 to 4. So maybe we can address this at the beginning of the next session.
That's perfect. We can do that.